continuing where we left off.
Sephering The Aleph. So as I said, the publishing group at Sefer had enlisted me to write a lexicon. We talked about that. Well, they last, was it October, said that they were going to stop funding the project. And as of communications in January of 2020, they ceased communicating and said they were going to have nothing more to do with the Mishkan pattern, the Erectology study, and I asked to redefine the terms, and they ceased communicating. So, I'm going to read a few pages of this that nobody has ever seen. A couple people I gave this book to because they have discarded and abandoned it. It's like a ship abandoned on the sea. When the captain leaves the ship, it's fair game for anybody to take over the ship. As a matter of fact, in a court of law where they have an American flag with gold braid around it, that's actually admiralty law. And when the judge and his officers leave the court, it's considered an abandoned ship. That's a legal concept. And so the Sephering Aleph Tav relationship, there's the ensign. This is actually the word bush. Samach Nun Hey is the word bush in Hebrew. Hey Samach Nun Hey is the bush. So this is a graphic which was that I drew just from the word the bush. And again, Nun Samach is the logo that we used at the Erectology class in 2011. Nun Samach is the word banner. Nas, it's also miracle, to lift up. Nun Samach. Yeshua said, if I be lifted up, the way Moshe lifted up the serpent on the stick in the wilderness. So the stick is the apparatus of the Samach, some sort of support trellis, a structure. And Nun is the letter that's living, that's like this, that jumps. So even the letter Nun is shaped like this jumping. So this Nun Samach is the banner lifted up. It says, in Song of Solomon, I think it was, his banner over us is love. Yeshua being lifted up, he'll draw all men unto him. The word bush is Samach Nun. So the Nun Samach and Samach Nun is the same two letters. Lifts us up on wings as eagles. And he said he carried them, as it were, on eagle's wings from Egypt to Sinai, bringing them to himself. So there's a lot in this understanding of the letters. When Moshe said he heard a voice speaking to him from the bush, now in my American 20th century mind, from watching movies and Disney cartoons, you might say, well, you're out there, you're in the wilderness, and there's a bush on fire, and you hear this voice speaking to you. Moshe, Moshe, speaking. You hear this audible voice from a bush. Maybe that happened. But there's a different way to read that. From the bush, Moshe received some kind of communication. Moshe means to be drawn out. Moshe. Drawn into the communication, his attention, his mind being spoken to from the bush. It wasn't the bush, it was Hesneh. What's in the bush? What's in Hey Samach Nun Hey? So the letter Hey is the fifth letter, our letter E. In Hebrew, it's shaped this way. So it looked like wings, like on fire. So drew this as the serpent, Nachash. Safar means to be on fire or flaming or copper. So I made the Nun as copper, the wings as golden flames, and then the silver is shekel. There's another word for silver also, I think. Anyway, it has to do with purchasing or redeeming, redemption. So silver for redemption. So it's gold, silver, and copper. But the point is, if you study this word, hasna, Hey, Samak Noon, hey. Yeah, it means bush, but regardless of the fact that it means bush, or the fact that that was 1500 BC, so 1500 years later, Yeshua said, if I be lifted up, the way Moshe lifted up the serpent on the stick, and Moshe didn't lift up the serpent on the stick having anything to do with the bush. That came quite a few years later. But there's these related themes of the same symbology of the spelling of the words. If you just stare at the spelling of that word, hey, Samak Noon, hey, hey, Samak Noon, there's a message in there. What's the message? Well, the Samak is a trellis, like the mast of a ship, like the shape of a tree, the vertical with the branches. See those Samaks out there? Noon is life. Is the life superimposed on the Samak? Another interesting thing, which we mentioned before, that the word Samak Noon Aleph, and the Aleph can be a suffix forming a noun, the same way the hey is a feminine suffix and the vav is a masculine suffix. An Aleph is a suffix forming a noun, especially in the Aramaic form, but it's the word for squirrel. Well, the squirrels jump around in the trees. They live in the trees. So maybe this noon is the life that's in the tree. Well, that's kind of like if the word hey, Samak Noon, hey, if the first hey is the, where does the come from? Well, hey is the fifth letter. And if the fifth letter is an expression from the Aleph of an intent to communicate in some form of a bet, well, if bet speaks of being the noun, the material substance, the cosmos, the universe, the objects in the universe, materialized. In Hebrew, the letter bet, the Paleo-Hebrew, is shaped like a tadpole or like a tent structure. Almost like a backwards kind of a cursive number 9, number 6 upside down. But see, in the Paleo-Hebrew, they didn't necessarily have a proper orientation of the orthography, which is to say, you know, we in English, and you go to grammar school and you learn grammar. Grammar comes from Greek grammaton, which means something written. So for people to say, well, the letter kills. There's a picture I did in here of that. The letter kills. Anyway, that was written in Corinthians. Paul said something, the ministry of death in letters. It's not exactly what he said. Here, page 111. Oh, skull and crossbones, but yet the skull isn't a skull, it's a keyhole. And there's like 5 teeth at the bottom. It's like 5 teeth of the Torah. There's a scimitar with the Paleo-Hebrew letters on here. The ministry of death in letters, written in Greek. Diakonos. Tau thanaton. Diakonos, that's where we get the word deacon. To minister, to administrate, the administration building of a school. The ones who conduct how things run so that they run smoothly and efficiently. Deacon, kind of like a hostess at a restaurant or a nurse in a hospital. Deacon in a church. So, administration of death in letters. And I mentioned the story that I was in Israel and saw a sign on a barbed wire fence that said, stay away, there's a landmine field on the other side of this wire. And if you cross this line at your own risk, you'll get blown to bits. That sign was using letters to administer, to tell me where death was. So the ministry of death in letters was Yahuwah using grammaton, letter. To think that Paul was against letters as if they were deadly, and yet Paul wrote a bunch of epistles. An epistle is a letter, is a writing, is a grammaton. Paul was all about grammaton. It's a misinterpretation in English, which is then turned into doctrine, which is then turned into regard, which is then turned into culture. Yahuwah himself invented the grammaton of death in letters. So this verse in 2 Corinthians, I think it's 3:16 or something, 3:6 or anyway, it is not about saying the letters kill, stay away from the letters, we don't need the letters, we don't need the words of the law. That's not what it's communicating. Instead of crossbones, this is a wrench and that's a shoe. It's like, shoe is the way you walk. It's the word halakah, and you walk on the path, which is haderek in Hebrew. And a wrench is used to adjust, to tighten, to, if you want to get your car aligned, you got to have some wrenches. We need to change or adjust the alignment of the way we walk on this path of letters. The path from Aleph to Tav, if it was invented by Yahweh, by Ehyeh, it was designed, laid out, and limited, established from here to there, from Aleph to Tav, from the source to the destination, from the launch to the target, in a prescribed 20-letter sequence, 22 if you count the Aleph and Tav. He determined that. The word halakah is to walk. Lakah, lek lakah. There's a verse that starts off with that same word, lamed kaf, lek lakah, and it's translated, you, go, get out. It's Yahweh speaking to Abraham, telling him to leave the land of his heritage, Ur of the Chaldees, and go to the land of Canaan, the promised land, inhabited by the Canaanites at that time. So to adjust or correct or properly align, to be properly aligned is yashar, yod shin resh, related to the word aleph shin resh, ashar. So when Yahuwah said to Moshe in Exodus 3 that his name was Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Ehyeh is to exist. Think about this for a moment. If you're going to do some artwork, make a graphic. Graphic is also coming from the word grammaton, graphis in Greek. Graph paper has lines on it, so you can organize and register what you're trying to draw. If you're doing drafting, lining up, drawing a part or a house or a building of some kind. Related words. If you're going to draw something that exists in its simplest form, what kind of image would that be? Think about it for a moment. If you're going to take a pen on a piece of paper and represent something that exists, what would it look like? A dot, a point. It's either there or it's not. In its simplest graphic representation, a dot. It exists. Anything more than a dot is beyond existence. It's expression, elaboration, adornment. But a dot is very simply, it either exists or it doesn't. So if a dot exists, that's the word Ehyeh, I exist. But the word asher is a line. Now the word yashar means straight, right, proper, smooth, authentic, valid, confirmed, related to the word asher. Asher can also mean like a tightrope. So I think of it as a straight line. Now whether it's a straight line or can be a curved line, that's a different matter. But the point is, asher is a straight line. And then there's another Ehyeh. So when Yahuwah said to tell them that Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, sent Moshe to speak to the leaders of Israel and then to speak to Pharaoh, it could be represented by a dot, a line, and a dot. If you're going to draw a picture of your deity, that's probably about as close as we can get. A dot connected by a straight line to another dot. He said, draw no image. Is a dot and a straight line a dot an image? Kind of, but it's a graphic representation of, that's all he gave us. He said, draw no forms, draw no images. That means you can't have a picture of your God hanging on a wall that looks like a human being. That's what he said. That means you can't have a statue of his mother. He said, have no image. Make no carvings of anything in heaven or earth, or in the sea under the earth. That's what he said. So why does his official church, why does the Catholic institution tell their people to have statues of the Virgin Mary if it's an abomination according to the instructions of Ahia himself? Are they leading their people astray? I mean, their people mean well. They're just doing what they're told. I'm not accusing or blaming. In fact, I'm not even accusing or blaming the Catholic Church or anybody who has a picture or a painting or a statue of the Virgin Mary. I'm saying we've been led astray. And this is a matter of the whole world returning to the truth. The Yashar, the straight, valid, authorized, authentic, confirmed truth. And if he says, if you do certain things, it'll abominate you. Hey, those two words.
Oh, Shaket and Shakat.
How do you spell those? Go! You want to look them up real quick? Show me on your computer and I'll read the letters. In the book of Leviticus, which some people say, a bunch of laws, the Israelites sinned. So he gave them a bunch of laws, and they sinned some more, so he gave them more laws, and they sinned more, and he gave them more laws. Well, that may be how the story reads, but I disagree that those laws are worthless, no good, and only for the bad people. I believe that everything Yahweh gave us was good.
Shaket right there.
Okay, this is spelled Shin Kuf Zadi, Sheketz, and it means filth. An idolatrous object, abominable or abomination, filth. That's a simple word from, is that from Strong's Concordance? What's the other word? So what we're saying here is that there's two words that are used in Leviticus and elsewhere to talk about the word abomination. Yahweh says if you do certain things, or if you eat certain things, you will become abominated. This word shakath, Shin Kuf Zadi. I could grab the red dictionary and get more out of it, but this is a little bit off the side of what we're going to be talking about here. But my point is, if you eat something filthy, you will become abominated. If you eat an abomination, it will become abominated. Yahweh told Israel, his people, do not eat roadkill. If something dies by itself because it was diseased, do not eat it. But you know the strange thing, he said, but you can sell it to a Gentile. A Gentile, a goy. You can sell it to somebody who doesn't care. What's the other word here?
That's Shakat's there.
That's one we just did.
No, we did Shaket.
No, that's Shin Kuf Zadi. That's the same word. There's another word that has a tet in it. The ninth letter.
Really?
Anyway. I can't remember exactly offhand how to spell it. But the point is, why would Yahuwah tell Israel, I'm telling you, this is what he's telling Israel, I'm telling you, do not eat certain food, do not do certain practices, because if you do, you will become, that's the same word.
Okay, but see, up here I got it.
They shall be abomination,
That's Shaket.
cause an abomination.
And this one is spelled that way, and it's Shakat's.
It's spelled exactly the same word, different vowel.
I
But there's
know.
another word with a tet.
Well, I don't know where that one is.
I could find it in the dictionary. Abomination, trying to think of what other word it would be. Profane. No, that would be halal probably. Anyway, the other word has to do with means to be dull or
It's not
thick.
that one, is it?
No, that's the same. No. That's Nun Bet Lamed Hey. Bala is where you get the word blah or babble. No, yeah, that's Bet Bet Lamed, but this is Nun Bet Lamed, different prefix. Nabal, which means fool. That's where that comes from there. Abigail's husband, who David ended up marrying Abigail after Nabal died, But she said, his name is Nabal, and Nabal he certainly is. People living into their names. Yahuwah said to his people Israel, I am Kadosh, Leviticus 19:2, therefore you shall be Kadosh. Yahweh wants us to be exactly like him, in his image, if you would. So he said for his people, Israel, he says, you alone have I known, or made myself known. Both. You alone have I known, you alone have I made myself known, among all the peoples of the earth. Israel, you alone. That means we can't look to any other culture, any other language, any other tradition to find out who Yahuwah is and how he wants us to live, other than the Hebraic. You could choose not to believe this, but that's what he said. So I choose to believe the scripture, the Hebrew writing. And he said it was in the Hebrew communication that he allowed himself to be known, made known, and that he would know or relate to the people who did those things. And so when he says, do not eat certain types of food, in quotes food, because he said to Israel, the things that I tell you not to eat, it's not food. So in the New Testament, where it says that, in English, that Jesus declared all food clean. We can eat whatever we want. Listen, you could always eat whatever you wanted. It's just not food. Everything that he called food is clean. And if he said to his people, do not eat it, it's not food and it's not clean. But if somebody wants to take what he said, this gives us license, this gives us liberty, we can do what he said not to do, we have a different people, a different culture, a different religion, Jesus okayed it. If you want that to be your Messiah, you go right ahead. You go right ahead. I'm not calling you a fool. But when Yahuwah said, I'm Kadosh, that word is translated holy. It's also sacred. It's also set apart. It's also betrothed. For him to reveal his Kadoshness to Israel, it's in a relationship of being betrothed. And the word betrothed means in the nature of truth. You can believe whatever you want. But the truth is, if you eat certain foods or types of things that you think is food, such as roadkill or that which dies of itself, or certain animals, which include pork and shellfish and fish that does not have fins and scales, birds of prey, and birds like ravens and vultures, which eat the dead, which shrimp and crabs do, it'll abominate you. The Creator built certain animals to be, as it were, vacuum cleaners of the world. They do their job. Oysters. I've heard that a bed of oysters can clean up an oil spill. But he told us not to eat the oysters. They do their job. And the more we eat the animals that do their job of cleaning up the world, the less the oceans will get purified and cleaned up. They'll get cleaned up. I believe I found verses where he said that he built the world to be recoverable. It will recover itself. The way the whole system is put together is it will recover when you do and allow it to be done according to as he built it. So when we pull every creature out of the ocean, which is supposed to be used to clean the ocean, and we eat it, we become intoxicated by the things that those creatures were eating, which was the filth, the pollutants. So we become filthy and polluted. And then the numbers of those animals in the ocean, those creatures that would be doing a job, is diminished, is depleted, and so the ocean is going to take longer to recover. And the same thing could be said of the air when we cut down the trees. And so he gave us to be tenders, to tend the garden. Shomer, the garden. Shin Mem Resh. You found it?
Oh, no. I just comment on what you just said. In Leviticus 20:25, you shall make a distinction between clean beasts and unclean, and between unclean birds and clean. And do not make yourselves abominable by beast or by bird.
Okay,
it tells
so
you right there.
He's telling us do not do that. Now, There's some people who have decided to teach and preach that these instructions are less than the maximum, the ideal, less than the ideal. And that if you're of the Spirit or of the Melchizedek order, then you don't have to pay attention to these instructions. You can believe whatever you want to believe. Go ahead and believe that if you want. Go ahead. In fact, you could even work on Saturday if you want. You can work on the Sabbath day if you want. You can work on the Moedim days if you want. Go ahead. Do whatever you want. But he said, don't work on the seventh day. Is that Saturday? Is that Friday? Is that Sunday? You need to figure out which day is the seventh day. But he said, don't labor, don't work on the seventh day. Why? Somehow it'll abominate you. It will make you less than you could be. It'll diminish you. It'll weary you. It'll exhaust you. It'll wear you out and wear you down. And that other word that he hasn't found yet, I forget how to spell it. I know the letter tet is in it, and it's a three-letter word. It means thick, dull, stupid. It's a picture of ignorance. It's like a tumor. So if you eat certain things, it'll basically make a cancer where it doesn't, your cells don't function properly. The human being won't function properly. So there's a proper, there's a less than proper. There's a function, there's a malfunction. And Yahweh said to his people, if you conduct your life and your heart and your mind and your processes of justice according to this system that he designed, it'll work. It'll recover. It'll work properly. And to the degree that we counter that system or do opposingly, opposite or less than the ideal, we invite in a diminishment to ourselves, to our consciousness, to our awareness, to our ability to perceive, to our ability to even relate to him. Oh, you can relate to him with a pure heart and still work on Saturday and still eat crab bisques or pork, bacon on your sandwich. Go ahead. He just said not to for his people. You don't want to be that caliber of people, but you still want to go to heaven? You still want to have your sins forgiven? Go ahead. Nobody's calling anybody names. We're just trying to read what he said. And he said, for his people, don't do that. To adjust the way you walk, to change your alignment according to the meaning of these letters. I could elaborate on this picture, there's more to it, but nevertheless, the point is, in the Torah, the teeth, normally we think of a key as teeth in a different way, but there's different ways you can design keys. The point is, what's the key? Mem, Pe, Tav, Het, a key. That which opens, Pe, Tav, Het. Well, Pe, Tav, He also opens, but Pe, Tav, He is to be seduced, something alluring, something enticing, and it's also fool and simpleton, like Nabal. Nabal is the fool who is easily enticed by something alluring and enticing or seductive, which is contrary to the covenant. Pe, Tav, Het is that only which opens according to the terms of the covenant. The married woman versus the prostitute, the harlot, the whore. Pe, Tav, He is the fool enticed by the whore. Pe, Tav, Het is the woman only open to her husband. Israel, only willing to do what Yahweh said to do and not do what he said not to do, is the Pe, Tav, Het. That's what the scriptures say. That's in the Hebrew language. And the key, that which opened, is the Mem, Pe, Tav, Het. The key, that which opens. That's the Vav. That's the masculine. Israel being the feminine. The human being the feminine form. Yod, He, Vav, He. Why is that written in the feminine form? Why is there a He suffix? Another little interesting thing. People say that Jesus is the bridegroom. Coming in the, him being the masculine and the human being being the feminine. But for him to be as a human, that's putting him in the feminine form, isn't it? How do you do that? if the Messiah appears as a human being, and if the human is the feminine form, and if the deity of Elohim is in the masculine form, then how does that work? And it says in the book of Matthew, I think, that or Luke, that the Holy Spirit impregnated Mary. Well, the Holy Spirit, people say, is the feminine aspect of Elohim. Why is it that the feminine aspect of Elohim is impregnating the feminine Virgin Mary? Huh? How does that work? What I'm saying is that when people like to lock things into identifying what things are, then all of a sudden it gets, oh yeah, now no, I don't understand. Now it's even more confusing. It's in the letters. I believe that explaining how all these things work is in the Hebrew letters. So to encourage people to stare at the Hebrew words and letters, well, those are just written as orthography, as grammaton. Those are all psalmic. That's this organized structure. Notice how the psalmic is written like a tree. There's the center, vertical, and then there's these three horizontals. Modern Hebrew psalmic's written differently. It's a saying, look at, there's a path, the tree grows from the ground up. Okay, there's an aleph growing up to some kind of a tav up there. So there's this line, there's this trajectory, but along the way there's these branches. There's these other parts. It's an organized structure. Well, that's the spelling of words. That's the drawing of letters. That's orthography. Orthography is the correct drawing shapes of letters and the correct spelling of words and knowing how to count. So when you're in grammar school and you learn how to count, you learn the organization of numbers and the value of numbers. I can draw a straight line. What does that mean? Well, we know that it means one, singular. Roman numerals make it real easy. 2 lines or 2 singulars, that's 2. 3 lines, that's 3. But when you get the 5 and a V, suddenly it's different. But what I'm saying is you draw 4 with a line through it, that's 5, that's easy. But in what they call Arabic numbers, a 5 is, how is that a 5? It's a shape we assign a value to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Shapes that somebody assigned a value to. That's a structure with a meaning. That's a psalmic with a noon. So look at that. The word bush, hey, psalmic noon, hey, the bush. The comes from the aleph. So the fact that the letter hey as a prefix literally means the, T-H-E, means that the aleph assigned a meaning. The. It's pointing to, it's declaring, it's identifying. That's what the word the means. It's identifying a specific. That's what the letter hey means. And that had to be determined by the aleph. So aleph had to exist and put something into a form bet, which is a noun, with then gimel is the word camel, which is a verb. A verb putting something into action. The fact that aleph could identify, that act of identification is a type of verb. To identify something is a verb. So gimel is the fact that bet could be identified. Dalet is a door drawn as a triangle shape in ancient Hebrew and in Greek, delta, dalet. And if you're on a highway and you have 2 lanes merging, they'll have a yield sign with a triangle, red triangle. Okay, so it's the blending of 2 things. Why did they use that triangle in the yield sign? Standing at the door is a decision. Oh, here's the door. Should I go in or out? Step up to the intersection. Do I go this way or that way? Do I go or do I stop? Any type of a decision is a dalet. If you weren't engaged in an action, you'd be not facing a dalet. If you weren't a bet that was gimmeling, you'd have no opportunity to dalet. But if somebody gives you a suggestion, hey, turn this way. Hey, this is that's hey. And then so to connect with the information is vav. So aleph is the beginning of the one who intended all things, put it into the bet form of creation, matter, noun, existence. Gimel is then this movement, this verb, this action, this something happening. Dalet is a decision or an option. Hey is an identification of information, of a suggestion from the Aleph of what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false, what is kadosh, what is not kadosh, what is healthy and what is an abomination. All that's Hey. And then for us to engage with the healthy, the strong, the right, the true, the correct, the yashar, is us, the human, vaving, V-A-V, or W-U-A-W. I spell it U-A-W, wah. Out of a slur, just calling it vav is just a poetic license. It's poetry. Hey, look, he's the vav, man. The words of the song of the Aleph Bet. Aleph is the lyrics of the song. Aleph is the plan that Abba purposed in his heart. Now, why do I say that? Because the word Ab, Aleph Bet, spelled Aleph Bet, is the word father, but it's also Aleph Bet Hey in the dictionary says it's to want, to wish, to desire, or to be against something. That's Ava, Aleph Bet Hey. He said, as I've planned, so shall it be. So Abba is the one who has the plan and the purpose in his heart, in his Ava, to want, to choose. So for him to tell, for Ehyeh, Abba, to tell Israel, I'm Kadosh, I want you to be Kadosh, eat these foods, don't eat those foods. That's the Aleph, expressing himself as Aleph Bet, expressing his Aleph Bet Hey to his Bet Nun, to his son. So we choose to listen. That's like a son listening to the voice of his father. If you want to eat bacon, and you want to eat pork loin, and if you want to eat, was it spare ribs? Barbecued spare ribs? They're tasty. But he said not to. Okay, so like that picture of the scimitar. Put the sword to your otherwise natural, normal human preferences, your cultural orientation. Put the sword to it and conform yourself to the alphabetic letters. You want to be his people? Halakah his derek. Walk on his way. How do you know his way? Just ask your pastor. Just ask your professor. Or not. Learn the Hebrew alphabet. That'll tell you the truth. That'll tell you just like Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. Dot, straight line, dot. This is what he said. This is the meaning and interpretation. Asher, Yeshar, Yeshar El. Yeshar El, literally the straight path of Elohim. And then Israel is supposed to exist as the dot in conformity to the first dot. So who's Yeshua? Yeshua said, I'm not coming to do my own will. I am not speaking my own words and doing my own agenda. I only say what my Father said. I only do what my Father did. I only conduct my actions according to his will. So that also is a picture of a dot, a straight line and a dot. Yeshua is the dot manifestation as a bet of the Aleph, which can't be manifested because it's infinite, unfathomable, incomprehensible, unidentifiable. So for the Aleph, the silent letter, to manifest as a bet is to contradict its very essence by putting into form what has no form. But yet Yeshua said he's not come in contradiction. He's come as the manifest presence of that which is omnipresent and can't be manifested. What a conundrum. What a dilemma. But the relationship between Aleph and Bet, the vast immeasurable to the exactly measurable, that's Aleph and Bet. That's the Father and the Son. How did he do that? He didn't tell us that. But what he gave us is the Aleph Bet. So for this guy that wrote on the comments yesterday, what was he telling you that he what was he telling you he wanted you to do?
He said that he heard from somebody that you said, it's one of those hearsay things. He got pretty nasty about it, concerning the deity of Messiah. I said, well, what side do you want to take? I could argue both sides, just to show you that this is a mystery that nobody's tapped
This
in.
is a deep mystery.
Very deep, yeah.
And the key in that keyhole of unlocking the mystery gets back to that verse where Yahweh said, who are these preachers and teachers that claim they know, then they understand? If they understand my mystery, Let them tell my people to quit their wickedness, stop being evil and wicked, and return to my words and do what I said. And he called it the Besod Yahweh, Bet Samik Dalet, or Bet Samik Vav Dalet. So here are these people that want to know the mystery, proclaiming we know how the Trinity works. Do you know that the great leaders of the Christian faith, when asked to define what the Trinity is, they say, well, it's a mystery, you just have to believe it. It's like, it's just a mystery you have to believe, but it's nowhere iterated in Scripture, and it can't even be defined and detailed according to all their great scholarly effects. And yet then this guy will say, what, he called you a heretic?
He called us a heretic. I said, wait a minute, Eric never said any of this stuff. I'm just asking you to have a friendly debate here. You pick a side and I'll pick the other side.
You can argue both sides, whether he's deity or whether he's not deity. Whether he comes from Elohim or Yeshua says, hey, don't worship me, worship the Father.
So many places in Scripture attribute the same aspects to the Father and the Son. Yet, in the New Testament, you have things that the Father's greater than I, he's the mediator between, It's just these confusing things, but there's a lot of things in Scripture where they're completely interchangeable. The first and the last, the Aleph through Tav.
They both claim to be Aleph and Tav. They both claim to be El Shaddai.
He said, destroy this body and I'll raise it up in 3 days. Then another place that said the Father raised him up. So, you got this interesting dynamic going on.
He intentionally played both sides. Let me clarify something. When I said, when Yeshua said, hey, don't worship me. No, the angels said, hey, don't worship me. Yeshua never said that. But he never told us to worship him. He also said, he always said, worship the Father. Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was praying before they crucified him, he said, it's interesting. It's like, what is the nature of prayer? But it's almost like he's going through a list. He's talking to his Father and he's saying, well, I came down here and I did this and I did that and these guys responded this way and that way. It's kind of like he's giving them an overview. It's like somebody goes on, like Lewis and Clark went on the expedition to discover the Northwest United States, what became the United States, and they came back and they gave an account. Well, this is what we did. This is what happened along the way, and we met these people and did those things and ate this food and found these rivers and mountains, and they gave an account. And Yeshua in the Garden of Gethsemane is basically doing the same thing. He says, well, here's what happened. I came, and he's talking to his Father as if his Father didn't know. There's kind of a joke cartoon where Yeshua's, he's got his elbows on the rock and he's praying and says, hey, Dad, it's me, you. What?
Yeah.
What? Hey, Dad, it's me, you? He left it a mystery. And for us to say we can't define it, I'm not going to try to define it, is because that's the way he gave it to us.
That's right.
But he gave us the Aleph Bet. And what I say, the answer to who is Yeshua compared to who is Yahuwah, who is the Father compared to the Son, the answer's in the Aleph Bet. So for the Father to be the one that he calls himself Ehyeh, who called himself Yahuwah, what do those words mean? Well, this last video I just defined, as I see, what those words mean. That there's stuff in the words. And just like this, the word the, as the letter Hey, means something came from another source to Samik, a structure, which is also Bet, which has a meaning. Like the squirrel living in the tree, the Nun lives in the Samik. In the bush, there's a meaning, which Hey then is expressed, which can be determined, which is what science is. Science is trying to read or fathom or comprehend or identify and put into a structure, into a meaning, that which was first put into it to begin with. So science itself is trying to analyze, identify, correlate, make sense of what was built into creation. Meanwhile, most of our scientists in their great profundity tell us there was no source, that it all just happened by accident. So the science tries to eliminate the fact that there was a Hey put into the organized structure which can be then interpreted and understood. Why would they do that? Nebal. Fools. For Moshe to look at the bush and realize a message was speaking to him, drawing him out of himself, to realize what was in the Hebrew Aleph Bet, that's all in this one word, Hasna, the bush. And then we realize, well, wait a minute, every letter of the Hebrew is a orthograph, a written form that carries a meaning, and the meaning that it expresses is the meaning that was put into it from on high. So the word the bush tells us we can just look at the writing of a letter, the spelling of a word, the sephering of a document, and there's something to be had whereby the silent Aleph is communicating within the design and organization and the meaning of his creation. And he fit that communication to the very consciousness of humanity. Because human consciousness, let's go to John 1:1, reduced. In the beginning was the Word. In the very beginning was the Word.
Whose
What
word?
Huh?
Whose word?
The word of the guy in the beginning, or the entity, not when I say guy, that's putting it into the masculine
So it would
form.
definitely be some kind of deity figure.
The word deity is where you get the word Dios, like Dios in Spanish, saying to, it's to the, use the word God. See, we're limited by words. Everything we express is words, and I know some people don't like using the word God or Dios or to deify, but it's like, because it's Greek and Roman, so you use the word Elohim, and the only way that Elohim can have a meaning, I remember as a kid hearing this word Elohim. I believe the Mormons used it, E-L-O-H-I-M, spelled with an E. I write it A-L-H-I-M because in Hebrew it's Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yod, Mem. Those are the English letters appropriated to the Hebrew letters, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yod, Mem, Al-Him. But it's pronunciated Elohim, and the Mormons use that word as if it was the name of a certain type of identifier of deity. As soon as you mention a word, people wrap meaning to it. As soon as you mention an organized structure, like the word, like the Samic, they wrap a noon on it. And we can't necessarily assume that we are of a common understanding, even if we're using the same words. So the only way to bring it back to the core of what I really mean, what it's really saying, is for me to understand what Elohim himself put into these words. Hebrew then becomes the common medium that if we can all agree according to a standard, well, that standard is like having a tape measure or a plumb line, carpentry tools, thermometer, registered to what? To Celsius or Kelvin or Fahrenheit? You gotta have a standard. The standard is the Mishkan pattern, correlated to the 7 days of creation, the 7 Moedim of Leviticus 23, the Beatitudes of Matthew 5. When you establish that as the registering medium, that's the Ishar, the straight line, whereby a man, a Vav, can relate to the Yod, the creator, whereby the intent of the Aleph can be perceived scientifically as what was built into creation, the Yod. Suddenly then, the entire Hebrew alphabet can be seen as the perfect balance, the perfect statement of truth. And then for the Mashiach to be that word in human form, embodying the perfection, the fullness of each letter as a human being, means that the consciousness of the human being is also an expression of the Hebrew 22 letters. So to learn Hebrew is to, got gnats flying around here. Anyway, for a human being to wrap his mind and his heart and his actions around what's expressed in the Hebrew letters is to readjust frequency, resonance, like a tuning fork. There it is. There's the tune. There's the exact. There's the real. For Yeshua to come as the reality in human form is to say that he came from the Aleph zone before creation into the created time and space, Bet zone, to Dalet, like this, being birthed through this Dalet-shaped birth canal into Hey, being manifest, being visible as Vav, a man, a human, who then would be Zion, put to the weapon, killed. Zion can also mean distinguished. Pilate put the crown of thorns on his head, a scepter in his hand, the cloak, the Roman cloak of state, mocking him. But yet by mocking him, he was saying, behold this man, which is Hey, Vav, Zion. Zion, Hey, or the word spelled Zion, Hey, or Zion, Aleph, Tav, is literally translated this. It's to be identified, to be distinguished. Who? The Vav. Hey, look. What we did with these Roman weapons to this man is Hey, Vav, Zion. So for Pilate to say, behold this man adorned with Roman weapons, is taking the three letters in their organic sequence, Hey, Vav, Zion, as a prophecy of the Messiah, Mashiach. Well, the word mem, the prefix letter mem, is to put into form. Shin Yod Het, Shiach, or Shich, is literally means communication, conversation. What communication? What conversation? The Hebrew alphabet. So for the Hebrew alphabet to come in human form as the Vav, and Pilate to adorn him with weapons, crucify him, kill him, and put him into a tomb, which is Het, and then Tet, roll around stone in front of him, and seal it, Yod, those first 10 letters identifies that individual that Pilate identified as this word made flesh. And the consciousness that he took on in human form is fit to our consciousness in somehow being and nature, the image of Elohim to be these 22 Hebrew letters. So for us to ponder Hebrew is to ponder our identity as being in sync imagery with the imagery that the Aleph put into the Yod, and chose himself to then somehow manifest in Vav form. Well, that's just the first 10 letters, and those can be elaborated upon. We'll have to do another video where I'll read a few pages of this, 4 or 5 pages in a moment. My point is, the reason why we keep encouraging people to learn Hebrew is because it's much more than just a language. It's much more than just learning how to spell words. It's the reality. It's for us to fulfill our intended purpose from His intent as to be human beings. It's in the Hebrew. And if your pastors and professors don't encourage you to do it, well, at least you'll get the voice here. But whether you do it is completely volitional, your choice. I'm not saying anybody's going to burn in hell if they don't learn Hebrew. But if the Hebrew tells you the correct path, and the people that are your professors and pastors who are leading you on a different path, you might end up burning in hell. But that's your call, your choice, your dalit.
You better get to work.
Can we do one more? Just real quick. Just let me read the first few pages, then I'll get to work. Burn in daylight.
All right.